Sometimes the kindest souls are the ones who've known the deepest hunger. In the winter of 1889, a young schoolteacher named Clara Wendell was quietly starving in a small Colorado mining town, too proud to beg but too weak to hide it. Every morning, a silent mountain man named Silas Kane left a basket of food on her schoolhouse steps. Fresh eggs, bread, and jerky appeared like clockwork. He never knocked, never asked for thanks, just left his gift and disappeared into the pines. For months, this quiet mercy kept her alive, while the town whispered and judged. Then, one spring morning, Clara did something that changed everything. What she gave back to the man who saved her life shocked everyone who doubted them both. What could a poor teacher possibly offer a man who wanted nothing in return? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Silver Pine, Colorado, wasn't much to look at in the best of times. In the winter of 1889, it was downright unforgiving. The town clung to the eastern slope of the Rockies like a stubborn barnacle, 400 souls trying to squeeze wealth from played-out silver mines and frozen ground. The main street ran a quarter-mile between false-fronted buildings that promised more than they delivered: a general store, a saloon, a boarding house, a church with a crooked steeple, and at the far end, past the last decent structure, a one-room schoolhouse that leaned slightly to the left, as if tired of standing upright. Clara Wendell rang the brass bell each morning at precisely 8 o'clock. The sound carried across the valley, thin and determined in the cold air, calling children from cabins and claims scattered across the hillsides. She stood in the doorway and watched them come, bundled against the wind, their breath making small clouds as they trudged through snow that never seemed to fully melt, even when the sun shone. There were 12 of them, ranging from 6-year-old Tommy Miller, who still struggled with his letters, to 14-year-old Sarah Johnston, who could recite entire passages of Longfellow from memory. Clara loved them all with a fierce, protective intensity that surprised her sometimes. She had come west thinking she would teach for a year, maybe 2, before finding a suitable husband and settling into the life her mother had always envisioned for her. But her father had died suddenly, his heart giving out one autumn afternoon while he was writing vocabulary words on a chalkboard back in Pennsylvania, and Clara discovered that a schoolmaster's savings didn't stretch far, especially not after the debts were settled. So she had answered an advertisement in a teacher's journal, wanted schoolteacher for mining town in Colorado Territory, room and board provided. Salary, $30 per month. It had seemed like a fortune at the time, a chance to start fresh where no one knew her as poor Clara Wendell, the schoolmaster's orphaned daughter. The reality had proven somewhat different. The room behind the schoolhouse measured 8 feet by 10 feet and contained a narrow iron bed, a washstand, a small stove that ate firewood like a starving animal, and a trunk that held everything Clara owned. The board part of room and board had never materialized. The town council had run out of money by November, and Clara's salary had been reduced to $15 per month, paid irregularly, and sometimes not at all. Mrs. Hawthorne, who ran the boarding house, made it clear that Clara's charity had limits. "I'm running a business, not a mission," she had said last month when Clara came asking for credit at the general store. "You want to eat? You need to pay like everyone else." Clara had nodded, maintaining the dignity her father had always insisted upon, and walked out with her head high and her stomach empty. She had sold her mother's cameo brooch to buy flour and beans, but that money was long gone. She had sold her second dress, the good one with the lace collar, then her winter cloak, then her father's pocket watch, the one thing she had promised herself she would never part with. By December, she was burning her own furniture for heat. The small chair went first, then the wobbly table. She kept teaching because the children needed her and because she didn't know what else to do. She grew thinner. Her dresses hung loose. She moved slowly, conserving energy, and told herself that spring would come eventually, and with it, perhaps, a solution. The children noticed, of course. Emma Carter, 8 years old with yellow braids and worried eyes, had brought her an apple one day. "Mama sent this for you, Miss Wendell," she had said, though Clara suspected Emma's mother had done no such thing. She had accepted it with tears in her eyes and shared it with the class, cutting it into 12 perfect pieces so everyone could have a taste. That night she had cried for the first time since leaving Pennsylvania. Not from self-pity exactly, but from the accumulated weight of loss and loneliness and the grinding, constant ache of hunger that had become her companion. She had written a letter to her aunt in Philadelphia asking for help, but never sent it. Pride was a funny thing. It kept your spine straight even when your stomach was empty. The morning the first basket appeared, Clara thought she was imagining it. She had opened the schoolhouse door at dawn to sweep the steps, a ritual that gave structure to her days, and there it was. A simple woven basket covered with a clean cloth, sitting on the top step like it had always belonged there. She looked around, saw no one, and lifted the cloth with trembling hands. Fresh eggs, 6 of them, still warm. A loaf of bread wrapped in brown paper, strips of dried venison, a small jar of honey. Clara sank down onto the cold step and stared at the basket like it was a vision from heaven. Her first instinct was to look for a note, an explanation, something that would tell her who had left this unexpected mercy. There was nothing. She took the basket inside and sat at her desk for a long time, just looking at it. Her mouth watered, her hands shook, but she didn't touch the food, not yet, because accepting it meant admitting how desperate she had become, and Clara wasn't ready for that admission. Not quite yet. By noon, she gave in. She scrambled 2 eggs and ate them slowly, savoring every bite. She cut a thick slice of bread and spread it with honey. She chewed the venison until her jaw ached. And when she was done, she felt more human than she had in weeks. The next morning the basket was there again. Fresh supplies, same items, same careful presentation. Clara took it inside, and this time she didn't hesitate. She ate breakfast and felt strength return to her limbs. She taught with more energy, smiled more easily. The children responded, sensing the change in her without understanding its source. On the 3rd morning she left a note. "Thank you. I don't know who you are, but your kindness has saved my life. Please let me know if there is any way I can repay you." The note was gone the next day. The basket remained. There was no response. Clara asked Mrs. Hawthorne if she had seen anyone near the schoolhouse at dawn. The older woman's eyes narrowed with something that looked like suspicion mixed with jealousy. "Can't say that I have. Why? Someone courting you in secret?" "No, nothing like that," Clara said quickly. "I just wondered." But Mrs. Hawthorne was like a dog with a bone. Within a week, half the town knew that someone was leaving food for the schoolteacher. The speculation ran wild. Reverend Matthews suggested it might be an act of Christian charity from someone wishing to remain anonymous. Mayor Garrett wondered aloud if Clara had an understanding with some local man. The women at the boarding house whispered behind their hands. Clara ignored it all. She had her own suspicions. She had noticed, in those early morning moments when she stepped outside, a figure in the distance, always the same direction north, toward the high country where the pines grew thick and the mountains rose up like a wall between earth and sky. The figure was there, and then it wasn't, moving through the trees with a silence that seemed impossible for someone carrying a basket of food. Old Jake Murphy, who sat outside the general store most days whittling and watching the world go by, confirmed what Clara had begun to suspect. She had stopped to buy thread, her only purchase in weeks, and Jake had looked at her with his rheumy eyes and said, "Silas Kane came through town 3 days ago. First time in near a year. Bought supplies at the store, more than usual." Clara's heart had skipped. Silas Kane? Mountain man. Lives up in the high country, past Widow's Peak. Been up there 20 years, maybe more. Used to trap, but mostly keeps to himself now. Jake paused, worked his tobacco. His wife was a schoolteacher, back before she died, and his little girl. Fever took 'em both. Clara felt something shift inside her chest. Understanding, maybe, or the beginning of it. She thanked Jake and walked back to the schoolhouse slowly, thinking about a man who had lost everything and chosen the mountains as his companion. A man who might see a struggling teacher and remember someone he had loved. That evening, she stood at her window and looked toward the dark line of pines in the north. Somewhere up there, in a cabin she couldn't see, lived the man who was keeping her alive. She didn't know his face, didn't know the sound of his voice, but she knew his heart, at least a little. And that knowledge filled her with something that felt almost like hope. 3 weeks passed, and the baskets kept coming. Clara's health began to stabilize. The hollows beneath her cheekbones filled in slightly. Her hands stopped trembling when she wrote on the chalkboard. She could stand for the full school day without her legs threatening to give out. The children noticed the change and seemed relieved, though they were too polite to mention it directly. Each morning, Clara found the basket waiting, and each morning she noticed something that touched her more deeply than the food itself, a hand-carved wooden spoon, always placed carefully atop the contents. It was the same spoon every time. Worn smooth from use, the handle shaped to fit comfortably in a palm. Someone's personal tool, lent out daily and returned each night. The intimacy of that gesture, the sharing of something used, something touched by hands she had never held, made Clara's heart ache in a way she couldn't quite name. She tried to catch him. Twice she woke before dawn and positioned herself by the window, watching the grey light creep across the valley. But Silas Kane, and she was certain now it was him, moved like smoke. By the time she saw movement in the distance, the basket was already on the steps, and the figure was disappearing into the tree line. He was impossibly quick for a man who must have been walking several miles each way in the dark. On the 4th week, Clara wrote another note. This time, she poured more of her heart into it. "Thank you. I don't know how to repay this kindness, but I want you to know it means more than food. It means someone sees me, someone cares whether I live or die. That's a gift beyond measure." She left the note tucked under the empty basket. She returned each evening, placing it back on the steps where the new one would appear. The next morning, the note was gone. The new basket sat in its place, the wooden spoon resting on top like always. But there was no response, no acknowledgement, beyond the continued generosity. Clara didn't know whether to feel disappointed or relieved. What she did feel, increasingly, was the weight of the town's judgment. Mrs. Hawthorne had started making pointed comments whenever Clara passed. "Must be nice having a man provide for you," she said one afternoon, loud enough for the other women on the boarding house porch to hear. "Wonder what you're giving him in return." Clara had kept walking, her face burning. She knew what they were implying. In a town where single women were scarce and suspect, any relationship between an unmarried woman and a man was subject to the worst interpretations. Never mind that she had never spoken to Silas Kane. Never mind that his gifts were left anonymously, without expectation or demand. The town had decided there must be something improper happening, because that was easier than believing in simple kindness. Reverend Matthews called on her one evening, his round face creased with concern. "Miss Wendell, I hope you won't take this amiss, but there's been talk about you and Mr. Kane." "There's nothing between Mr. Kane and myself," Clara said carefully. "He's been kind enough to help me through a difficult time. That's all." "I'm sure that's true," the Reverend said, though his tone suggested he wasn't sure at all. "But appearances matter, especially for someone in your position. The school board has responsibilities to the community. They have to consider what's proper." Clara felt something cold settle in her stomach. "Are you suggesting I refuse his help?" "I'm suggesting that you might want to find another way. Perhaps if you came to the church, we could organize a proper charity, something more appropriate." Clara looked at him for a long moment. She thought about the months of hunger, the cold nights, the way she had sold everything she owned while the town watched and did nothing. She thought about the church suppers she had never been invited to, the community collections that had somehow never included her. Where was this charity 3 months ago, Reverend? Where was it when I was burning furniture to keep warm? The Reverend flushed. We didn't realize. You didn't want to realize. But now that someone is actually helping me, now it's improper? Now it requires intervention? Clara stood, drawing on a reserve of strength she hadn't known she possessed. Thank you for your concern, Reverend, but I'll handle my own affairs. After he left, Clara sat in the gathering darkness and felt the weight of an impossible choice settling over her. She could refuse the baskets and starve with her reputation intact. Or she could accept them and face increasing condemnation from the community that employed her. Either way, she lost something essential. That night, she barely slept. She lay in her narrow bed and listened to the wind testing the gaps in the schoolhouse walls. She thought about Silas Kane, alone in his mountain cabin, walking miles through the darkness to leave food for a woman he had never spoken to. What motivated such generosity? Guilt over his dead wife? Loneliness? Or something simpler, the basic human recognition that someone needed help and he had the means to provide it? In the morning, she made her decision. She would continue accepting the baskets, she would continue teaching the children, and she would find a way to repay Silas Kane, even if she didn't know how yet. Because refusing his kindness to satisfy the town's sense of propriety would be a betrayal of something more important than reputation. It would be a betrayal of the connection forming between two lonely people, fragile as new ice, but real nonetheless. The basket appeared as always. Clara took it inside and prepared breakfast. While she ate, she looked at the wooden spoon and thought about the hands that had carved it. Strong hands, she imagined, patient hands. Hands that knew how to make something useful and beautiful from a simple piece of wood. She began, leaving small gifts of her own. A pressed wildflower from the meadow behind the school, a drawing one of the children had made of the mountains. A piece of cloth she had hemmed. She noticed his basket cloth was fraying at the edges. She didn't expect responses, and she didn't get them. But the gifts disappeared each night, and somehow that was answer enough. The school board meeting was called for a Thursday evening in late February. Clara received a formal notice delivered by Mayor Garrett himself. Nothing to worry about, he assured her, though his eyes said otherwise. Just a routine review of school operations. Clara knew better. She wore her best remaining dress, the one she had somehow managed not to sell, and walked to the meeting with her spine straight and her head high. The board consisted of 5 men: Mayor Garrett, Reverend Matthews, the owner of the general store, the foreman from the largest remaining mine, and a rancher from the valley below town. They sat behind a table in the church basement and looked at her with expressions ranging from sympathy to disapproval. Mayor Garrett opened the proceedings. Miss Wendell, we've asked you here to discuss some concerns that have been raised about your conduct. My conduct as a teacher? Clara asked, though she knew what was coming. Your conduct generally, the mine foreman said bluntly. You've been accepting gifts from Silas Kane, substantial gifts, from what we hear. That raises questions about your character and your suitability as an instructor of children. Clara felt anger rise in her throat, hot and bitter. But she forced herself to speak calmly. Mr. Kane has been kind enough to help me during a time of financial difficulty. Difficulty, I might add, that resulted from this board's decision to cut my salary and then fail to pay even that reduced amount regularly. The men shifted uncomfortably. Reverend Matthews cleared his throat. We understand that times have been hard. Do you? Clara interrupted. Do you understand what it's like to choose between heat and food, to sell everything you own just to survive another week? I've been teaching your children faithfully for over a year. I've never missed a day. I've bought supplies with my own money or what little I had, and when I was starving, not one of you offered help. But now that someone has shown me kindness, you question my character? The issue isn't the help itself, the general store owner said carefully. It's the nature of the relationship. What is Mr. Kane expecting in return? Nothing, Clara said firmly. He's never spoken to me, never approached me. He leaves food and disappears. If you want to question someone's character, perhaps you should examine your own. What does it say about this town that you assume kindness must have a corrupt motive? The room fell silent. Clara could hear her own heartbeat, loud in her ears. She had probably just ended her employment, but she didn't care. Some things were worth fighting for, even if you lost. Finally, Reverend Matthews spoke. The girl has a point. We should be ashamed that it took an outsider to help one of our own. Maybe the question isn't about Miss Wendell's character, maybe it's about ours. The vote was close, 3-2 in favor of keeping Clara on, but with conditions. She was placed on probation. She was to avoid any appearance of impropriety, and she was strongly encouraged to seek support through proper channels rather than accepting questionable assistance. Clara walked home in the dark, feeling both victorious and defeated. She had kept her job, but at what cost? The board's conditions were clear. She had to stop accepting Silas's help or risk losing everything. That night, she cried for the second time since coming to Silver Pine. Not from hunger this time, but from the injustice of it all, the cruelty of a world where accepting kindness could destroy you. The next morning, she didn't take the basket. She left a note instead. I'm so sorry. They've forbidden me from accepting your help. Please know that your kindness saved my life, and I will never forget it. Thank you for seeing me when I was invisible. She walked inside without looking back and taught her classes with tears threatening behind her eyes. That evening, the basket still sat on the steps, untouched. She left it there. The morning after that, a new basket appeared anyway. Clara stared at it from her window, her heart breaking. He wasn't going to stop. He didn't care what the town said, but she couldn't risk her position. The children needed her. She needed the job, meager as it was. She left the basket untouched again. On the third day, something changed. At noon, while Clara was teaching multiplication to the younger children, she heard boots on the wooden steps outside. Then a knock on the door, firm but not aggressive. She opened it, and there he stood. Silas Kane, in full daylight, in full view of anyone who cared to look. He was taller than she expected, broad-shouldered, with a weathered face and grey-streaked dark hair. His eyes were blue and direct, holding a depth of feeling that made Clara's breath catch. "Need to talk to you," he said. His voice was rough from disuse, but not unkind. "Won't take long." Behind Clara, 12 children stared in absolute silence. Outside, she could see curtains twitching in windows across the street. Half the town would know about this within the hour. But Silas Kane stood there waiting, patient as stone, and Clara realized that something fundamental had shifted. The time for anonymity and silence had ended. Whatever came next would be faced directly, in the light of day, with witnesses. "Step outside," he said, "please." And Clara, feeling like she stood on the edge of something vast and irreversible, followed him into the cold February sunlight. Spring settled over Silver Pine like a blessing. The snow retreated to the highest peaks. Grass greened in the valley. Wildflowers bloomed in riotous color across the meadows, and Clara Wendell, who had nearly starved through the winter, found herself experiencing something she had forgotten was possible: happiness. She and Silas developed a routine. Every Saturday evening she would walk to the creek bridge, and he would be waiting. Sometimes they went to his cabin for dinner. Other times they simply walked the mountain trails, talking about everything and nothing. He showed her hidden places, a waterfall that thundered with snowmelt, a meadow where elk grazed at dawn, a grove of aspens that would turn gold in autumn. Clara learned about his life before tragedy. He had been a different man then, more social, quicker to laugh. He had been a trapper and guide, respected for his knowledge of the high country. He and Mary had been married for 5 years when the fever came. Their daughter, Sarah, had just turned 4. She looked like her mother. Silas told Clara one evening as they sat on his porch watching the sunset. Same dark hair, same way of tilting her head when she was thinking, smart as a whip. Used to follow me around asking 100 questions a day. Mary must have been special, Clara said gently. She was. Patient with me, which took considerable effort. Silas smiled at the memory. She civilized me, made me want to be better than I was. When they died, I couldn't see the point of being better anymore. Easier to just disappear. But you didn't. You're here now, because you came along, half-starved and too proud to ask for help, reminded me that disappearing isn't the same as living. They fell into comfortable silence, the kind that only exists between people who don't need to fill every moment with words. Clara felt peace settle over her like a warm blanket. This was what she had been missing, not just companionship, but understanding, someone who had known grief and come through the other side, even if scarred. The town, predictably, had opinions. Mrs. Hawthorne made pointed remarks about inappropriate relations and shameful behavior. Other women whispered behind their hands. Some of the men at the saloon placed bets on when the mountain man would tire of the schoolteacher and return to his solitude. But there were defenders too. Old Jake Murphy made it clear that anyone who spoke ill of Clara in his hearing would answer for it. Reverend Matthews, to his credit, preached a sermon about judging others and the importance of Christian charity. Several of the parents whose children Clara taught told her privately that they didn't care what she did in her free time. She was the best teacher their children had ever had. The school board, however, was less forgiving. Mayor Garrett called Clara in for another meeting in early May. "Miss Wendell, we need to discuss your continued association with Mr. Kane." Clara kept her voice level. "My friendship with Mr. Kane is my own business, not when it affects your position here. Parents are concerned. Some are talking about pulling their children from school." "Which parents?" "Mrs. Hawthorne. She hasn't spoken a kind word to anyone in 20 years. Mayor Garrett shifted uncomfortably. "There are others, respectable people who question whether someone of your moral character should be teaching their children." "My moral character?" Clara felt anger rising but controlled it. "I have done nothing immoral. Mr. Kane and I are friends. We talk, we take walks, that's all." "That may be, but the appearance is that a lonely woman and a lonely man have found friendship. If this town finds that scandalous, the problem isn't with us, it's with you." The mayor's face reddened. "I'm trying to help you, Miss Wendell. If you continue this relationship, the board may have no choice but to terminate your employment." Clara stood, gathering her dignity around her like armor. "Then do what you must, but I won't give up my friendship with Silas Kane. Not for this job, not for this town, not for anyone. Some things are worth more than safety." She left before he could respond, walking out into the spring sunshine with her heart pounding. She had just threatened her livelihood, her security, everything she had worked for. But the thought of giving up Silas, of returning to the loneliness she had known before, was unbearable. She would rather starve again than lose what they had built together. That evening, instead of waiting for Saturday, she walked directly to Silas's cabin. She needed to tell him what had happened, what might be coming. She found him in his workshop, a small building behind the cabin, where he did his carving and repair work. He was working on something delicate, his large hands moving with surprising precision. "Clara?" He looked up, surprised. "Everything all right?" "The school board threatened to fire me, because of us." She said it directly, without softening. Silas set down his tools carefully. "I'll stop coming to town. Stay away. That'll satisfy them." "No," Clara's voice was firm. "That's not what I want. I came here to tell you that I'm not giving this up. Our friendship, our time together, it matters too much. It's your job, Clara. your livelihood. I'll find another job, another town, but I won't find another you." The words came out more intensely than she intended, revealing feelings she hadn't fully acknowledged even to herself. Silas stared at her for a long moment. Then he crossed the workshop and took her hands in his, the first time he had touched her, beyond helping her over rough trail. His hands were warm and calloused and gentle. "You'd give up everything you've worked for? For this?" "Yes." "Then I need to tell you something." Silas's voice was rough with emotion. "I told myself this was just friendship, that I was too old, too damaged, too set in my ways for anything more. But that's not true. The truth is, I care about you, Clara, more than I've cared about anyone since Mary died. And that scares me more than anything I've faced in 20 years. Clara felt tears prick her eyes. "It scares me too. I never thought I'd feel this way about anyone, but here we are." "Here we are," he agreed. Then, very carefully, as if she might break, he pulled her into an embrace. Clara pressed her face against his chest and heard his heart beating steady, strong, alive. They stood like that for a long time, holding each other in the fading light, two wounded people finding unexpected healing. When they finally pulled apart, Silas kept hold of her hands. "I have some money saved. Not much, but enough. If they fire you, we'll figure something out. You won't starve again. I won't allow it." "We'll figure it out together," Clara corrected gently. "Together," he agreed, and the word hung between them like a promise. Clara walked back to town that night knowing that everything had changed. What had started as anonymous kindness had become friendship, and now, standing in Silas's workshop with his hands holding hers, it had become something deeper, something worth fighting for, something worth the risk. The school board would make their decision, the town would talk, life would get more complicated. But Clara had learned something important over the past months. Survival wasn't enough. You had to live. You had to reach for connection, even when it was dangerous. You had to accept kindness, even when pride said to refuse it. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, kindness turned into something more, something that looked a lot like love. The final week of May brought both beauty and tension. The mountains were brilliant with late spring lupine and Indian paintbrush covering the hillsides in purple and red. Clara's students were energetic with the approaching end of the school year, and she found herself teaching with a joy that came from having something to look forward to beyond the classroom walls. But underneath the beauty, pressure was building. The school board scheduled another meeting for the first week of June. This time, Clara knew the decision would be final. Either she would keep her position or she wouldn't. Either the town would accept her friendship with Silas or they would force her to choose. She continued teaching as if nothing were wrong. Each morning she rang the brass bell that had called children to school since before she arrived. Each afternoon she dismissed them with homework and encouragement, and each evening she thought about what came next. Silas grew quieter as the meeting date approached. Clara could see the worry in his eyes, the tension in his shoulders. He blamed himself, she knew, for bringing this trouble into her life. One evening, sitting on his porch with the last light fading from the sky, he tried to tell her so. "This is my fault. I should have stayed away." "Don't." Clara's voice was sharp. "Don't you dare blame yourself for being kind, for caring. The fault lies with people who see something good and try to destroy it. Maybe I'm being selfish. Maybe I should step back, let you keep your job. Silas Kane, you listen to me." Clara turned to face him fully. "You saved my life, not just my body but my spirit. You reminded me that good people still exist, that kindness isn't dead, that someone could see me, really see me and care. If you think I'm going to let you disappear back into these mountains, you're wrong. What if they fire you? What then? Then we figure out something else. I can teach somewhere else. I can do something else entirely, but I won't give up you. Not for a job, not for this town, not for anything." Silas reached for her hand, threading his fingers through hers. "You're the stubbornest woman I've ever met. I learned from the stubbornest man." They sat in silence, hands linked, watching stars emerge in the darkening sky. Clara thought about the winter, the hunger, the cold, the desperate loneliness. She thought about the first basket, appearing on her steps like a miracle. She thought about all the small moments since then, the gradual building of trust and understanding. Whatever the school board decided, she had gained something far more valuable than employment. She had gained someone who saw her, understood her, cared for her without condition or expectation. The night before the meeting, Clara couldn't sleep. She lay in her narrow bed and listened to the wind and thought about possible futures. If she kept her job, things could continue as they were. Friendship with Silas, constrained by town opinion, carefully managed to avoid further scandal. If she lost her job, she would have to leave Silverpine, find another position in another town, start over yet again. Unless there was a third option, one that scared her even more than the other two. She could stay. Not as a teacher, but as something else. Someone's wife. Silas had never proposed, had never even spoken of marriage directly. But the feeling between them had grown beyond friendship. They both knew it. The question was whether they were brave enough to name it, to claim it, to build a life on it. The meeting was held on a Tuesday evening in the church basement. Clara arrived early, wearing her best dress, her hair carefully arranged. She carried herself with the dignity her father had always insisted upon, even though her stomach churned with nerves. The room filled slowly. The 5 board members took their seats behind the table. Behind them, the room filled with townspeople, some supportive, many merely curious, a few openly hostile. Mrs. Hawthorne sat in the front row with a satisfied expression that made Clara's hands clench. Mayor Garrett called the meeting to order. "We're here to address the continued employment of Miss Clara Wendell as schoolteacher. Miss Wendell, you know the concerns that have been raised about your association with Mr. Silas Kane." "I do," Clara said clearly. "We've received a petition from several parents requesting your removal. They feel your behavior sets a poor example for their children." "May I see this petition?" Mayor Garrett looked uncomfortable. "That's not necessary. I think it is. I'd like to know exactly who objects to my teaching." The mayor reluctantly passed her a paper. Clara scanned it quickly. 7 names, 7 families out of 12. And at the top, in elaborate script, Mrs. Hawthorne's signature. "I see." Clara handed the petition back. "May I speak?" "The floor is yours." Clara stood, feeling every eye upon her. She thought about what to say, how to defend herself. But in that moment, looking at the assembled townspeople, she realized something important. She was tired of defending, tired of explaining, tired of making herself smaller to fit into other people's expectations. "I came to this town a year ago with very little," she began. "I taught your children faithfully. I cared for them. I gave them everything I had. When I was starving, I kept teaching. When I sold everything I owned, I kept teaching. When I had nothing left, I kept teaching. Not one person in this room offered help. Not one." She paused, letting the words sink in. Simple, quiet kindness. He asked nothing in return. He expected nothing. He just helped because he saw someone in need, and he had the means to do something about it. And this town has treated that kindness like a scandal. Mrs. Hawthorne started to speak, but Clara raised her hand. "I'm not finished. You want to fire me because I'm friends with Silas Kane, because we spend time together, because we care about each other. Well, let me save you the trouble of voting." She reached behind her neck and untied the strings of her teaching apron, the simple white apron that marked her as the school teacher. She folded it carefully and placed it on the table in front of the board. "I resign. Effective immediately. Find someone else to teach your children. Someone who meets your standards of propriety. Someone who will accept your judgment and your cruelty without question. That person isn't me." The room erupted. Several people spoke at once. The mayor banged his gavel for order. But Clara had already turned toward the door, her head high, her decision made. She walked out into the warm evening air and felt, for the first time in months, completely free. Clara walked through the streets of Silverpine with her heart pounding but her steps steady. She had just given up her livelihood, her security, her purpose. She should have been terrified. Instead, she felt lighter than she had in years. The burden of other people's expectations had fallen away, leaving only clarity. She knew where she was going. The trail to Silas's cabin was familiar now. Even in the gathering dusk, she climbed steadily, her mind racing with everything she needed to say. She had made a choice, a dramatic, possibly foolish choice, and she needed to tell him before she lost her nerve. The cabin lights were visible through the trees. Silas was on the porch, as if he had been waiting for her. He stood as she approached, his face creased with concern. "Clara, what happened? You're supposed to be at the meeting." "I was at the meeting. I resigned." Silas stared at her. "You what?" "I resigned. Quit. Told them to find someone else." Clara climbed the porch steps and stood facing him. "I was tired of defending myself, tired of apologizing for caring about you, so I left." "Clara, no. Your job, you need that job. I need you more." The words came out simple and true. "I need this. Us. Whatever this is, between us. I need it more than I need their approval." Silas pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. She felt him trembling slightly, felt the emotion radiating from him. "You shouldn't have done that. Not for me. I did it for both of us. For the possibility of something real." Clara pulled back enough to see his face. "Silas, I love you. I know it's too soon to say it. I know we've only known each other a few months. But it's true. I love you. Clara, you don't have to say it back. I just needed you to know, needed you to understand why I walked away from everything, because you're worth more than a job. You're worth more than their good opinion. You're worth everything." Silas cupped her face in his hands, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "I love you too. God help me, I love you. I thought I'd never feel this way again. Thought that part of me died with Mary. But you brought me back to life, Clara. You made me remember what it means to care about someone." They kissed then, finally, after months of restraint and careful distance. It was gentle and fierce at the same time, a kiss that tasted of hope and risk and new beginnings. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard, both laughing a little at the intensity of feeling between them. "What are we going to do?" Clara asked. "I have no job, no prospects." "I can't stay at the schoolhouse. They'll need it for the next teacher. You'll stay here. With me. We'll figure the rest out." Poseidon. "Silas, I can't just move in with you. The scandal. Then marry me." The words came out rough but earnest. "Marry me, Clara. I know it's fast. I know we should probably wait, court properly, do things the right way. But I'm too old and too tired to care about proper. I want you in my life. Permanently, legally. So no one can question it or take you away from me." Clara felt tears spill over. "This is a big step. I've never been more sure of anything, except maybe that first morning when I decided to leave you a basket. I knew then you were going to change my life. I just didn't know how much." "Yes," Clara whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you." They held each other on the porch as the stars came out, two people who had found each other against all odds. Clara thought about the journey that had brought her here, the loss, the hunger, the desperate loneliness. All of it had been necessary to bring her to this moment, this man, this unexpected joy. But their happiness was interrupted the next morning by an unexpected visitor. Clara woke in Silas's cabin. She had slept in his bed while he took the floor, propriety maintained even in their engagement to the sound of horses. She dressed quickly and came outside to find a well-dressed man dismounting, with Silas standing tense and wary nearby. "Mr. Kane," the man said formally, "I'm Arthur Pemberton from the Rocky Mountain Mining and Timber Company. I've been trying to reach you for weeks. I got your letters. Burned them. Silas's voice was flat. Not interested in selling my land. Please hear me out. We're prepared to make an extremely generous offer. $15,000 for your 600 acres, including all timber and mineral rights. Clara gasped. $15,000 was a fortune, more money than most people in Silverpine would see in a lifetime. Silas shook his head. Not interested. This land is mine, staying mine. Mr. Kane, that's an extraordinary amount of money. You could live comfortably anywhere, do anything you wanted. I'm living comfortably here, doing what I want. Answers no. The man sighed, clearly frustrated. Could I at least leave the paperwork? Think about it. The offer will remain open for 30 days. Won't change my mind. Nevertheless, Pemberton handed over a thick envelope. Please consider it. That's more than fair market value. We need the timber access, and your land provides the best route to the high country. After Pemberton left, Clara and Silas sat on the porch looking at the envelope. That's a lot of money, Clara said carefully. It is. You could do so much with it. Build a bigger house, buy more horses, travel. Could. Silas tossed the envelope onto the porch rail without opening it. Don't want to, Silas. This land is all I have left of Mary and Sarah. We picked this spot together, built this cabin with our own hands. They're buried in that grove over there. He pointed to a stand of aspens. I can't sell it, Clara. It would be like selling them. Clara understood. But that night, after Silas had fallen asleep, she sat by the fire and thought about the money. $15,000. What could be done with that kind of wealth? And more importantly, what did Silas really need the land for? He lived simply, didn't use most of the acreage. The graves would still be there, protected by law, even if the land changed hands. She didn't say anything. Not yet. But an idea was forming, something that scared her with its audacity and rightness. Something that would require convincing Silas to let go of the past and embrace a future that honored his dead wife without being bound by her memory. 3 days later, Clara rode into town alone. She went to the schoolhouse, where she found Emma and several other students playing outside. "Where's Miss Thompson?" Clara asked, referring to the woman the board had hastily hired to replace her. "She left," Emma said sadly. "Said the accommodations were unsuitable and the pay was insufficient. She only stayed 2 days. Clara felt a surge of grim satisfaction. The board was learning that good teachers weren't so easy to replace. She continued to the general store, where she found old Jake Murphy in his usual spot. "Jake, I need your help. I need to know exactly what's going on with the school." Jake studied her. "Board's in a panic. Can't find anyone to take the job. Most of the children aren't attending. Parents are angry." "Good," Clara said. Then, seeing his surprised expression, she softened. "I mean, not good that the children are suffering, but good that the board is facing consequences. What are you planning, girl? Something either brilliant or insane? Maybe both." Clara paused. "Jake, if Silverpine had enough money to build a real school, a proper building with a library and supplies, and a guaranteed salary for a teacher, would the town support it? Course they would. But where would that kind of money come from? What if I told you I could make it happen? What if I could give this town a school that would serve children for the next 50 years? Jake's eyes narrowed. "You're talking about Kane's land sale. I'm talking about using money wisely, about honoring a dead woman's memory by supporting the work she loved, about making something good come from loss." Clara leaned forward. Mary Kane was a teacher. She loved education. What better way to remember her than by ensuring every child in this valley has access to real learning? Kane won't sell. He's attached to that land. He will if I ask him to, if I show him how much good could come from it. Clara stood. "I need to talk to the mayor, and then I need to talk to Silas, and then we're going to change everything." Jake watched her go, shaking his head with a mixture of concern and admiration. That girl's either going to save this town or burn it down. Maybe both. Clara walked toward the mayor's office with her heart pounding. She was about to ask the man she loved to give up everything he'd been holding on to for 20 years. She was about to use her influence over him for a purpose that might break his heart or heal it. She didn't know if she had the right, didn't know if it would work, but she knew one thing: Mary Kane would have approved. And sometimes that was enough to make the impossible seem possible. Mayor Garrett looked up in surprise when Clara walked into his office unannounced. "Miss Wendell, I didn't expect to see you here. I have a proposal for you. One that solves your school problem and gives Silverpine something it desperately needs." The mayor gestured to a chair. "I'm listening." Clara sat and laid out her plan in clear, direct terms. Silas would sell his land to the mining company for $15,000. Half of that $7,500 would go to building a new school. A proper school building with glass windows, a wood stove that actually worked, a separate residence for the teacher, and a library. The money would also fund a guaranteed salary for a teacher for the next 10 years, plus an annual budget for books and supplies. That's extraordinary," Mayor Garrett said, clearly stunned. "But why would Kane agree to this? He's refused to sell for years." "Because I'm going to ask him to, and because it honors his late wife's memory." Mary Kane was a teacher. She believed in education. What better tribute than ensuring every child in this valley has access to quality schooling? And the other half of the money? Silas keeps it. He'll buy the old Morrison ranch at the edge of town and start raising horses. Good, working horses for the mines and ranches. It's been his dream for years, he just never had the capital. Mayor Garrett leaned back, studying her. "You've thought this through." "I have. But I need your help. I need the town council to agree in writing to the school plan. I need guarantees that the building will be constructed properly, that the funds will be managed responsibly, that future boards won't misuse the money. And in return," Clara met his eyes steadily, "in return, I'll come back as the teacher, with a proper salary and proper support. But there's a condition." "What condition?" "Silas and I are getting married. I won't teach here if that's going to be a problem. The town needs to accept us, both of us, or find someone else." The mayor was quiet for a long moment. Finally, he nodded. "I think we can arrange that. Frankly, Miss Wendell, after the disaster with Miss Thompson, we're not in a position to be choosy. And if you're bringing this kind of investment to the community, the least we can do is show some gratitude. Get me the agreements in writing. I'll talk to Silas." Clara left the mayor's office and walked directly to the church, where she found Reverend Matthews working on Sunday's sermon. "Reverend, I need to ask you something. Could you perform a marriage ceremony this Saturday?" The Reverend looked up, startled. "This Saturday? That's quite soon. Who's getting married?" "Silas Kane and I. We'd like it to be small, private, just the two of us and whatever witnesses are required." "Miss Wendell, I'm delighted to hear you're making your relationship proper, but no conditions, Reverend. No lectures about propriety or judgment. Just a simple ceremony. Will you do it?" Reverend Matthews studied her for a moment, then smiled. "Yes, I'll do it. And for what it's worth, I think Kane is a lucky man." Clara spent the rest of the day preparing for the conversation she needed to have with Silas. She knew it wouldn't be easy. He had refused the land sale outright, and asking him to reconsider felt like a betrayal of his trust. But she also knew that holding on to the past wasn't the same as honoring it. Sometimes love meant letting go. That evening, she rode to the cabin on one of Silas's horses he had been teaching her to ride, and she was getting better at it. She found him repairing a fence in the pasture, the late sun casting long shadows across the valley. He looked up and smiled when he saw her, that rare smile that transformed his weathered face. "You're getting good on that horse." "I had a good teacher." Clara dismounted and walked over to him. "Silas, we need to talk." "About the land." His smile faded. Clara, I told you. I know what you told me, but I need you to hear me out. Really hear me. She took his hands. For us, for children who don't even exist yet. Clara, please, just listen. And then she told him everything. The new school building, the guaranteed funding, the library with real books, the teacher's residence where she could live comfortably, the opportunity for him to buy the Morrison Ranch and build the horse breeding operation he had once dreamed about. Silas listened in silence, his face unreadable. When she finished, he walked away a few steps, staring out at the mountains. You're asking me to sell the land Mary and I built our life on. I'm asking you to honor her by supporting the work she loved. Silas, you told me Mary believed in education. She was a teacher. What would she say if she knew you could help hundreds of children get a real education? What would she want you to do? That's not fair. Life isn't fair. We both know that. Clara moved to stand beside him. But we get to choose how we respond to unfairness. We can hold on to grief and let it define us. Or we can take what we've lost and transform it into something good, something that helps others. You want me to let go of the past. I want you to honor the past by building a future. There's a difference. Clara took his hand again. Your cabin will still be there. Mary and Sarah's graves will still be protected. The mining company isn't going to destroy the land. They just need access to the timber beyond it. And with that money, you could buy the ranch, raise horses the way you always wanted to. You could stop hiding in these mountains and start living again. I'm not hiding anymore. I have you, and you'll still have me. But Silas, think about what we could do together. A real school for this valley, children learning in a warm building with real books, a teacher who's paid fairly and treated with respect. That's Mary's legacy. That's how we honor her. Silas was quiet for so long that Clara began to worry she had pushed too hard. But finally, he spoke. She would have liked you. Mary. She would have approved of this. I hope so. She always said I held on too tight, that I needed to learn when to let go. He turned to face Clara. After she died, I held on even tighter, held on to grief, to anger, to this land. Held on to the past because it was safer than the future. And now I have a reason to let go. You showed me that. Silas pulled her close. All right, I'll sell. But on one condition. What condition? We name the school after her, the Mary Kane School, so every child who walks through those doors knows that a woman who believed in education made it possible. Clara felt tears spill down her cheeks. That's perfect. She'd be so proud of you. I hope so. Because I'm terrified. Silas held her tighter. What if I'm making a mistake? What if... Then we'll make it together. And we'll figure out how to make it right. Clara pulled back to look at him. Silas, we're getting married on Saturday. After that, everything we do as partners. Your decisions are my decisions. Your risks are my risks. We're in this together. Saturday, he looked surprised. That's fast. I'm tired of waiting. Tired of being proper. I want to be your wife. And I want to start building our life together. Is that all right with you? More than all right. Silas kissed her forehead. How did I get so lucky? We both got lucky. Against all odds, we found each other. The next few days were a blur of activity. Silas met with Arthur Pemberton and signed the papers for the land sale. The mining company's lawyer drew up the documents, ensuring that half the money would go to the school fund, managed by a board that included Clara, Mayor Garrett, and 3 other townspeople. The plans for the new school were drafted by a builder from Denver, a solid structure that would serve the community for generations. Old Jake Murphy, serving as an unofficial town crier, spread the word about what was happening. The reaction was mixed. Some people were thrilled, particularly parents who wanted better education for their children. Others were skeptical. wondering if Clara Wendell had somehow manipulated Silas Kane into giving away his wealth. Mrs. Hawthorne, predictably, was outraged. "That woman has bewitched him," she announced to anyone who would listen. "Mark my words, she'll take that money and run." But most of the town was simply grateful. The children especially were excited about the new school. Emma Carter started a drawing of what she thought the building should look like. Other students wrote essays about what books they wanted in the library. For the first time in months, Silverpine felt hopeful. On Friday evening, Clara packed up her few belongings from the schoolhouse. She had lived in that small room for over a year through hunger and cold and loneliness. Now she was leaving it behind for a new life. Reverend Matthews stopped by to help her carry things. "Quite a transformation," he observed, "from starving schoolteacher to savior of the town's education system." "I'm not anyone's savior. Silas is the one making this possible. You're the one who showed him how. Don't diminish your role." The Reverend handed her a box. "I owe you an apology, Miss Wendell. I should have helped you last winter. Should have organized the congregation to support you. I was weak when you needed strength. You're helping now. That's what matters. Nevertheless, I'm sorry, and I'm honored to perform your wedding ceremony tomorrow." That night, Clara stayed at the boarding house. Mrs. Hawthorne grudgingly provided a room, probably hoping to hear gossip. Clara lay awake thinking about the next day. By this time tomorrow, she would be married. She would be Clara Kane, wife of a mountain man, soon to be teacher of a brand new school. Her life had changed so dramatically in 6 months that it felt like a dream. But it wasn't a dream, it was real, built on kindness and risk, and 2 people brave enough to reach for something better. In his cabin, Silas lay awake too, thinking about Mary. "I hope you understand," he whispered to the darkness. "I loved you. I'll always love you. But I love her too, and I think you'd be happy about that. I think you'd tell me I waited long enough." The mountains gave no answer, but Silas felt a peace settle over him that he hadn't known in 20 years. Tomorrow he would marry Clara Wendell. Together they would build something new, something that honored the past while embracing the future. And somehow he knew Mary would approve. The celebration that followed was spontaneous and heartfelt. Someone had organized a gathering at the church hall, nothing fancy, just tables of food brought by various families and a space for people to talk and congratulate the newlyweds. Clara was overwhelmed by the warmth. These same people who had judged her so harshly just weeks ago were now embracing her as one of their own. "People change their minds when you do something extraordinary," old Jake told her, pressing a glass of lemonade into her hand. "You gave them a school. That buys a lot of goodwill. It wasn't just me. It was Silas. It was both of you. That's what partnership means." Jake looked over at Silas, who was awkwardly accepting congratulations from a group of miners. "That man's been alone too long. You're good for him. He's good for me too." The afternoon passed in a blur of conversation and well wishes. Parents thanked Clara for coming back to teach. Children asked when the new school would be ready. Mayor Garrett pulled both Clara and Silas aside to show them the final contracts, everything properly documented, everything legal and binding. The school would be built. The funds would be protected. Clara's salary would be guaranteed. "Construction starts next week," the mayor said. "The builder estimates 3 months to completion. We're aiming to open the Mary Kane School in September, in time for the new academic year." Clara squeezed Silas's hand. "The Mary Kane School, it sounds perfect." As the sun began to set, Clara and Silas finally managed to slip away. They rode together on Silas's horse, Clara in front of him, his arms around her, up the familiar trail to his cabin. Their cabin now, their home. The evening was warm and golden, the kind of mountain evening that made everything feel possible. They didn't talk much during the ride. There was something profound about the silence, about simply being together without the weight of uncertainty that had pressed on them for months. At the cabin, Silas dismounted first and helped Clara down. She stood looking at the building that would now be her home, trying to imagine the life they would build here. Not forever. Eventually they would move to the Morrison Ranch when the purchase was complete, but for now, this was enough. More than enough. "Are you happy?" Silas asked, and there was something vulnerable in the question, something that reminded Clara he had been alone for so long he might have forgotten how to read another person's feelings. "I'm happier than I've ever been." Clara turned to face him. "Silas Kane, you saved my life. Not just with food, though that helped. You saved me from loneliness, from giving up, from forgetting that good people still exist in this world. You saved mine too. I was just existing up here, not living, going through the motions. You gave me a reason to come down from this mountain, a reason to care about tomorrow." They went inside, and Clara looked around with new eyes. This wasn't just Silas's space anymore, it was theirs. She would need to add her own touches, make it reflect both of them. But for tonight, it was perfect exactly as it was. Silas lit a fire in the fireplace, not because they needed the heat, but because the ritual felt right. They sat together on the bench he had built, watching the flames dance. Clara leaned against him, feeling the solid strength of his presence, the quiet certainty of his love. "Tell me about tomorrow," she said softly. "And the day after that, tell me about the life we're going to build. Tomorrow we'll ride down to look at the Morrison place, make sure we want to buy it. Then we'll start planning. Corrals, a barn, maybe add on to the house. We'll need more room eventually." "Eventually?" "When we have children. If you want children." Silas glanced at her, suddenly uncertain again. "I know I'm older. Maybe you don't. I want children. Your children, our children." Clara smiled. "I want to fill that ranch house with noise and laughter and all the chaos that comes with a family. Mary and I only had one, Sarah. I always wished we'd had more. Time to make up for that now." They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then Clara asked the question that had been on her mind. "Do you think Mary would approve of us?" "I know she would. She told me once, before she got sick, that if anything happened to her, I shouldn't hide. She said I had too much love in me to spend it all on grief." Silas pulled Clara closer. "She was right. Took me 20 years to figure that out, but she was right. I wish I could have known her. You would have liked each other. She was stubborn like you, smart like you, cared about things that mattered." Silas paused. "I think maybe she sent you to me. I don't know if I believe in that sort of thing, but I like to think she had a hand in it somehow." Clara thought about all the coincidences that had brought them together. Her father's death, the advertisement for a teaching position in a town she had never heard of, the timing that put her in Silver Pine during the exact winter when she would need help, Silas happening to see her teaching through the schoolhouse window. "Maybe she did," Clara said softly. "Maybe she knew you needed someone to bring you back to life. And you needed someone to keep you alive. We saved each other. We did." Clara turned to look at him, this man who had become her whole world in just 6 months. "And we're going to keep saving each other every day for the rest of our lives." Silas kissed her then, a kiss that promised exactly that. A lifetime of saving each other, choosing each other, building something beautiful from the ruins of what they had lost. Outside, the mountains stood eternal and unchanging. But inside the cabin, everything had changed. 2 broken people had found wholeness. 2 lonely souls had found connection. And in the morning, they would wake up together and start building the future they both deserved. 3 months later, on a warm September morning, Clara stood in front of the new Mary Kane School and felt her heart swell with pride and gratitude. The building was beautiful, far better than she had dared to hope. Large windows let in natural light. A proper wood stove sat in the corner, guaranteed to keep the children warm through even the harshest winter. Shelves lined one wall, already filled with books purchased with the school fund. And in the back, a comfortable teacher's residence waited, though Clara wouldn't be using it. She had a home now, with Silas at the Morrison Ranch. The brass bell from the old schoolhouse had been moved here, the same bell Clara had rung every morning for over a year. But next to it hung a new, larger bell, cast in Denver with an inscription that read, Mary Kane School, 1889, built with love, dedicated to learning. Clara reached up and rang the new bell for the first time. The sound carried across the valley, clear and strong, calling children to their first day in the new building. She watched them come, more than the original 12 now. Families from neighboring areas had heard about the new school and were sending their children. 23 students would fill these desks today. Emma Carter was first to arrive, as always. She was 9 now and had taken on the role of unofficial assistant teacher. "It's so beautiful, Mrs. Kane," she said, using Clara's married name with obvious pride. "Better than I even drew it." The other children filtered in, eyes wide with wonder at the space, the books, the newness of everything. Clara had arranged the desks in rows, with a large chalkboard at the front and maps on the walls. It was a real school, the kind she had always dreamed of teaching in. At 9 o'clock, just before Clara called the class to order, Silas appeared in the doorway. He rarely came to town anymore, too busy with the ranch, with the horses he was raising, with building the life they had planned. But today was special. "Wanted to be here for the first day," he said simply. Clara walked over and took his hand. Together they looked at the room full of eager children, at the books waiting to be read, at the promise of all the learning that would happen within these walls. "Your wife would be so proud," Clara whispered. "Our wife would be proud," Silas corrected gently. "She's part of both of us now." Mayor Garrett arrived with several town council members for a brief dedication ceremony. He gave a short speech about community, about investment in the future, about how Silas and Clara Kane had transformed Silver Pine's prospects with their generosity. The children performed a song they had practiced. Emma read a poem about learning and dreams. Then Silas spoke, his voice rough but clear. "My wife Mary believed that education was the greatest gift you could give a child. She believed that every young person deserved a chance to learn, to grow, to become something more than circumstances might allow. This school is built on that belief. It's my honor to dedicate it to her memory, and to all the teachers like her, like my wife Clara, who give their lives to shaping young minds. May this building stand for 100 years. May it serve thousands of children. And may every person who walks through those doors remember that education is the foundation of everything good we hope to build." There wasn't a dry eye in the room. Even Mayor Garrett, never one for sentiment, had to clear his throat several times. Old Jake Murphy, sitting in the back, wiped his face with a handkerchief and muttered something about dust. After the ceremony, after the officials left and the children settled into their first lessons, Clara stood at the front of her classroom and felt complete. She was exactly where she was meant to be, doing exactly what she was meant to do, teaching children, shaping futures, honoring the woman who had come before her and the man who had made all of this possible. At noon, when she dismissed the children for lunch, Silas was waiting outside with a basket. The sight made Clara laugh. A basket from Silas Kane, just like that first winter. But this one wasn't about survival. This was about love, about partnership, about a shared life. They sat on the schoolhouse steps, proper steps now, not the worn boards of the old building, and ate together. Fresh bread, cheese, apples from their own trees at the ranch. Simple food, but infinitely precious because of what it represented. "Happy?" Silas asked, the same question he had asked on their wedding night. "So happy I can barely stand it," Clara admitted. "Sometimes I think about last winter, how desperate I was, how close I came to giving up. And then I think about now, and it feels impossible that this is my life. Nothing impossible about it. You fought for it. We both did." Clara leaned against him, watching her students play in the yard. "We did, didn't we? Fought against loneliness and judgment and fear, fought for something better, something real, and we won. We won. That evening, after Clara had dismissed school and locked the new building, she and Silas rode home together to the Morrison ranch. The house was taking shape. They had added 2 rooms already, with plans for more. The corrals were filled with horses, beautiful animals that Silas was training for work in the mines and on the ranches. It was becoming a real operation, a real business, a real future. As they rode, Clara thought about the journey that had brought them here. The hunger, the baskets, the quiet kindness that had saved her life. The way love had grown from necessity into choice, from gratitude into genuine partnership. She thought about Mary Kane, who she had never met but felt connected to through shared purpose and through the man she loved. She thought about all the children who would learn in the school, built with Mary's name and Clara's determination and Silas's sacrifice. Sometimes, Clara reflected, the greatest love stories don't begin with grand gestures or dramatic declarations. Sometimes they begin with simple kindness, a basket of food, a pressed flower, a reason to keep living. And sometimes that simple kindness grows into something that transforms not just 2 lives, but an entire community. The mountains rose around them, eternal and beautiful. The sun set behind the western peaks, painting everything gold. And Clara Kane, formerly Clara Wendell, formerly a starving schoolteacher with nothing but pride and persistence, rode home with her husband to the life they had built together. She had asked for nothing but survival. She had been given everything she needed. And in return, she had given back something precious, a future for children she would never meet, an education for generations yet to come, proof that kindness multiplied and love endured, and good things were still possible in a hard world. That was legacy. That was love. That was enough. More than enough.